It's finally happened. We have an FSR4 update officially in Cyberpunk with patch 2.3, which brings a lot of other cool stuff as well, and I have a lot of other news stories to talk about today. But one reason why I'm bringing this up in a news story rather than in a benchmarking video is that AMD's FSR4 implementation will also require a driver update. Now that driver doesn't seem to be out yet, but the patch is out. So as soon as AMD gets that driver out, expect some testing of FSR4 officially in Cyberpunk on the channel. Now some of you are like, I've already been using it with Optiscaler anyway, and I've done some videos about adding FSR4 support to games with Optiscaler, so let's include in this news update that the experimental builds of Optiscaler are actually claiming that FSR4 support has improved greatly, pretty much fixed all the non-working games, excluding Vulkan, and anti-cheat enabled games, of course. Now, anti-cheat enabled games, you don't want to be modding game files with anti-cheat and get yourself banned. That's one of the downsides to using Optiscaler rather than getting official support. Now, FSR4 is absolutely huge. This is, by using AI in this, it has improved it so much over previous versions that I'm really excited to see how it plays out, especially with how bad the FSR3 version was implemented in Cyberpunk. Now, another really cool use of AI is Gamma.App. Let me show you why Gamma.App is the most popular AI presentation app in the world with 50 million users. It's the best alternative to PowerPoint, and its beginner-friendly AI generation and editing features mean that even someone with no design skills can get a great result in minutes. And a huge thank you to Gamma.App for sponsoring today's video. Many of you know that I have 2 kids and still teach math full-time in addition to running my YouTube channel, so I need to be highly efficient with my time. Sometimes my kids wake up sick and I need a last-minute substitute teacher who is often not able to deliver the math lesson I had originally planned. I can now generate a professional algebra review lesson plan for a substitute teacher to deliver from a single prompt. I can then review the generated plan, make tweaks as needed, like editing images with a single click, and export as a Google slide, PDF, or PowerPoint if needed, but I can also just share the plan as a link or present within Gamma itself. I have been seriously blown away by the power of Gamma.App and how simple it is to use. This can absolutely save you time and improve your results, making professional presentations, and best of all, you can try it out for free to experience it for yourself. There really is no catch, so follow the link in the video description and/or pinned comment. Now, before we move on from the Cyberpunk 2.3 update news, let's talk about some other cool stuff here. Again, we have XeSS 2 with frame generation. That'll be really cool for Intel users. Another thing I might want to test out on the channel if I have time. And also for console users, getting variable refresh rate support. But really interestingly to me is actually getting Appl M Series support officially for Cyberpunk now. Now, I've been interested in if Apple would ever actually take gaming seriously and really get support, like, let's put it this way, like Valve has done a massive amount of work with SteamOS, getting Linux actually working extremely well as a gaming platform. You know that Apple has the resources to do that kind of thing if they really wanted to target it. And look, I'm not trying to say like I'm some huge Apple fan or anything like that, but actually, if you look at the amount of like actual compute power available on the cheaper things like their like Mac Minis and things like that, it'd be kind of interesting if they actually had some gaming use case that you know would actually be worth talking about. Now, they do have official system requirements here, but I was looking to see if anybody had this benchmarked yet. I don't have Apple stuff to actually test out myself. And I did actually find that HardwareLuxx, this is machine learning translated, and by the way, all my sources will be linked in the video description, so check the details there, has actually run some benchmarks on an M3 Pro. And now one thing that's interesting here isn't just that it's getting official support, but also that it has the machine learning upscaler with MetalFX built-in support as well. Now, I was hoping this would look pretty good, but if you take a look at HardwareLuxx's YouTube video showing this, as well as their thoughts on it, it's that the image quality does leave something to be desired. Again, follow the link, so I don't want to just like steal all their results here. Give them a visit to actually check that out. But I was not super impressed with the image quality they were getting out of that, unfortunately. And this brings up a really difficult space where we're at with how do you compare hardware and GPUs and game performance when cross platforms you're using different upscaling techniques, where just matching the internal rendering resolution isn't necessarily actually a match to what you're getting. Digital Foundry was looking at this with Cyberpunk, with like looking at the Switch 2 using some kind of lightweight version of DLSS, it seems like, that supports the Switch 2 hardware, versus like, let's say you're doing the Steam Deck, but using FSR3. Well, FSR3 might look worse than the DLSS implementation at the same rendering resolution. Then you also have XeSS. And how do you tell all of this, how do you match that? How do you rate that in reviews? This is something that's really difficult for me as a GPU reviewer, which is why I found this post on Intel's community blog kind of interesting, because they're talking about developing a technique for assessing real-time video quality for computer graphics, and going beyond just the models that do that for videos specifically. Because what you're looking for in a video game, especially with looking for, machine learning, upscaling, artifacts and things like, can be different than what you're looking for with video compression, which is where a lot of the previously available techniques were based on. Now, this looked promising at first, but I think it's got a couple of downsides why I couldn't necessarily just like use it in a review or something like that, which is that it does still require a ground truth video to compare to. And I think the problem with that is a lot of times when I'm benchmarking a game, I can't get an absolutely identical footage using the different techniques. And then what do you consider the ground truth? Is it native TAA running at some ridiculously high resolution? So this does have some downsides still. They do mention the possibility of getting this to work better if maybe without needing the ground truth image, that kind of a thing. But one thing that's interesting with this is that they're trying to get this to match to human perception. And they are showing some metrics that their newly developed algorithm does correlate super well using a PLCC, Pearson Linear Correlation Coefficient. A value of 1.0 would be super well correlated, and they are showing that theirs is getting extremely close to human in their data set that they're developing here. Anyway, the point is, I don't think after reading this is at a point where I could use this in a graphics card review, but I'm wondering if maybe something like this could eventually get developed where, in other words, how do you objectively rate the image quality you're getting using the different upscaling techniques? Because currently I have to rely on side-by-side footage and my subjective analysis. It would be kind of neat if you could just like spit out a number that assigns a value to it. But there's downsides to that as well. I don't know, guys. It's just really difficult in the current landscape of graphics card reviews to do what I think is responsible, which is you need to address these upscaling techniques as a big part of the review, because I think most people use them. So ignoring them I don't think is the right call, but then as soon as it becomes just a subjective opinion, well, that gets difficult too. So anyway, I don't think this solves the problem, but I am interested in research on these topics. So there's that. Now, another interesting development is the whole Xbox branding of PC hardware. Now, the one that we know the most about at this point is the ROG Ally, which is branded with the Xbox branding, but a big question has been how much are these going to cost? Now, we have seen an Asus ROG Xbox Ally listed at 599 euros with the Ryzen Z2 and at 899 euros with the Z2 Extreme at an official Spanish distributor. Again, you could go ahead and follow the links here, and I believe that does include VAT, so maybe, if you're in the US, you might want to think about how that might scale out of it. But the point is, I really want to see the just official like US MSRP on these things, because that's one kind of big question mark in the PC space right now is Xbox going to turn into basically just a branding label or maybe some certain set hardware sets or something like that of basically just pre-built gaming PCs that boot into a gaming-friendly version of Windows that maybe works well on a controller? And if so, what is the cost going to be? Because with the traditional console model, you're producing in massive quantity and also counting on software sales to be where the profit's at, so you can sell at a loss on hardware. And that's been, a subsidized model. Whereas, is that still gonna? Are they still gonna gamble on a subsidized model if they're releasing as PCs? And my guess would be no. So anyway, hopefully, if anything at least comes out of this, it would be maybe a more gaming optimized and controller and big screen and handheld friendly version of Windows. And hopefully the likes of SteamOS and things like that has lit a fire under Microsoft to fix a lot of what is wrong with Windows. Or maybe we should all just abandon it and move on to Linux anyway, to be honest. But let's move on to some more GPU hardware sales news. Now, I've seen a lot of people running with this data set way further than they should be, saying that, AMD's 9070 XTs are just massively outselling Nvidia. And if you look at actual more entire market analysis and Steam hardware survey and all sorts of things, it points to that not being the case. However, at least at one major German retailer, it is showing that the 9070 XT is the best-selling GPU right now. Now, this is from it's Mind Factory, I believe, in Germany, and they do publish their sales numbers, which most stores don't. So it's an interesting data set, and it does show numbers like the 9070 XT selling 470 units in the same time frame that, the best-selling Nvidia GPU is a 5060 Ti with 145 units. Kind of interesting. The 9060 XT sold 255 units, with only 40 of them being 8GB units, certainly showing that the 16GB ones seem to be selling better, at least at this store. But again, it's really important not to over extrapolate what this is telling us, right? This tells us what people at Mind Factory are buying. It's not anything like a global market share research. So I would imagine that people in other regions might have different buying habits. I would also imagine that people buying pre-built systems are a large portion of the number of GPUs actually being sold, and that most of those are probably still Nvidia GPUs. That kind of thing. But at least, the DIY GPU market in Germany, specifically at this specific retailer, is certainly showing, strong sales results for AMD here, which is interesting, but again, certainly not indicative of the overall global market share. Now, I'll just throw this in here, which is that if any of you are not allergic to the Epic Games Store, they've got Civilization 6, not just the base game, but the Platinum Edition, which has 6 DLC packs and 2 expansions, completely free right now. I guess my head is covering up that part of it here. So, free version of Civ 6 with a bunch of content on it on the Epic Games Store right now. Seems pretty cool. And then let's move on to some other quick updates. We have FurMark 2.9 released with support for GeForce RTX 5050 and Radeon AI PRO 9700 GPUs. We have AMD's Zen 6 rumored to primarily be using TSMC N2P and N3P for low-end mobile SKUs. This is reported by videocards.com, but they appear to be sourcing it from Kepler L2 in the AnandTech forums. And Kepler L2 has got many AMD leaks correct in the past, but that doesn't necessarily guarantee future success, nor has everything that they've said always come to pass. I thought this was interesting. We're seeing Assassin's Creed live-action TV series being officially greenlit by Netflix. The official statement being, "We've been fans of Assassin's Creed since its release in 2007. Every day we work on this show, we come away excited and humbled by the possibilities that Assassin's Creed opens to us." That was David Weiner and Robert Rober. Patino. Anyway, saying beneath the scope, the spectacle, the parkour, and the thrills is a baseline for the most essential kind of human story about people searching for purpose, struggling with questions of identity and destiny and faith. Anyway, we could just keep going on here, but it could be interesting. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. Video game to TV or movie adaptations do not always go well. And on a related note, we have known that there's a Zelda movie in the works. Nintendo saw a lot of success with their Mario movie, and, I thought it was at least okay. And we are now getting the actors playing Zelda and Link. So we are getting a look at it here. So we are getting the actors. I believe this appears to be them in character, since that does appear to be Zelda's, blue dress, and could be a Link-style tunic here. It's looking like Zelda is being played by Bo Bragason, and Link is played by Benjamin Evan Ainsworth. Now, I'm honestly not super into movies and, which actor's done what and if they're good and whatnot, but I thought I'd at least include the update to that project here in the news today. We are also getting final PC system requirements for WUCHANG Fallen Feathers. Now, it's not a detailed enough systems requirement sheet for me to do a dedicated video on that. Perhaps we'll get a more detailed specs sheet with, resolutions and frame rate targets and all of that. So for now, I'll just include it in the news video today. We are seeing that the minimum requirements will be a GTX 1060 6GB or a Radeon RX 580 8GB. They are specifying it has to be those higher VRAM versions, with the 1060 having a 3GB version. I think there was a 4GB version of the 580, so careful on that. And we are seeing that it will require 16GB of memory and processors along the lines of a Core i5-8400 or Ryzen 5 1600. They are also saying that an SSD is recommended, although an HDD is supported. And important to note, they're saying the above specifications were tested with DLSS or FSR enabled, meaning this is not native resolution. However, they're not even saying what resolution that is targeting or what frame rate. I'm going to assume it's heavy use of upscaling just to hit 30 FPS with maybe a 1080p output, but lowering, much lower internal rendering resolution. But it doesn't actually say that. That's just kind of me speculating. Now, the recommended specs are going to be moving up the processor to a Core i7-9700 or AMD Ryzen 5 5500. A Ryzen 5 5500, somewhat similar to the performance of what's in like a current gen console. And 16GB of RAM, an RTX 2070 or AMD RX 5700 or Intel Arc A750. For graphics, and once again, they are noting that now for recommended performance, an SSD is required, and that this was once again tested with DLSS and FSR enabled. If I had to guess, we're talking about upscaling to hit 1080p 60 at maybe medium-ish settings, given the kind of specs we're seeing and what I've seen of the game, but again, that is kind of speculation. The game is going to launch on July 24th, so and it is going to be on Game Pass day one. So if you have Game Pass, that might be a low barrier to entry to check it out. Now, I thought this was interesting. We have seen a test of Nvidia's neural texture compression combined with Microsoft's DirectX cooperative vectors, reportedly reducing GPU VRAM consumption by up to 90%. Now, this is specifically not like a real actual game running it and seeing that much of a GPU, VRAM reduction. This is instead looking at like a pretty basic, just kind of test render, and then looking at the amount of VRAM being used in the scenes. So it's looking like they're able to reduce from, I believe, 79.38 megabytes down to around 9 megabytes using that, and that DP4A can run it, but at a much lower frame rate. So notice that there's frame rate numbers here, and this is running over 2,000 frames per second. Again, this isn't a real full game, and I doubt that you'd see the entire game's VRAM footprint reduced by 90%. I think this is more about specific textures in this specific little test scene. But anyway, I think it is an interesting technology, and again, having the cooperative vectors to allow not just, in other words, I think the idea behind that is for this not to be complete. Whoa, I accidentally, look, ray tracing on. I accidentally kicked on a light here. Anyway, RT on. To not have this be so proprietary and locked down. I think the idea is so for GPUs with matrix, multiply and computer, whatever it's called, hardware, that you can get to it via DirectX a lot of different ways rather than just this being a proprietary thing that's different if you're running it on Nvidia's Tensor cores or different if you're running it on Intel's XMX cores or AMD's machine learning hardware. Can't remember if they've branded that as anything in particular. Anyway, that's kind of the general idea. Now, I do want to give a little bit of a sad note here at the end, which is the father of Elder Scrolls steps back from game development because of cancer. Now, this is not Todd Howard. I've seen a lot of people assume that this is Todd Howard based on saying father of Elder Scrolls. This is Julian LeFay, who was more behind the development of the very first Elder Scrolls games. We're talking like, what was it, Daggerfall or an Arena, I think. I don't remember all the full details, despite having been an Elder Scrolls fan for quite a while myself. Morrowind is still my favorite. Anyway, but this is a sad note on that. However, it did have me look into where are we at with the next Elder Scrolls game. And the latest is just in the rumor side of things, but saying the Elder Scrolls 6 is in a quite playable state, though release window remains unknown. Now, personally, I'm hoping that they've learned some lessons from Starfield and maybe are willing to take, I don't know how to put it. Just, I'm hoping for some better and more exciting, quest writing, things like that. Remember I mentioned that Morrowind is my favorite Elder Scrolls game? A lot of that is the setting. It is so unique. It's extremely well written. You have this feeling of exploring something truly unusual. And I'd like to get back to that kind of feeling. I don't think any Elder Scrolls since then has quite had that same feeling for me. Of course, it could be just that, your first time experiencing that kind of open world is always going to be your, maybe it's going to be hard to ever match that feeling, even if other things would deliver it, if that was your first experience. I don't know. It's hard to say when you're this old and have played this many games, but I'm hoping Elder Scrolls 6 will get we'll get the franchise back on track. We'll have to see. But anyway, that's the news that I've got for you guys today. Stay tuned to the channel for updates, including some actual testing of that FSR4 update as soon as we do actually get AMD's drivers. I hope all of you have an excellent day.